The use of AI is on the rise, and I'm sure that's no surprise to anyone. However, I've been spending some time thinking about what considerations do we need to make as it relates to the use of AI when it comes to video content or content in general. And I'm going to look at this from the lens of consumers and creators. But before I get into that, I would encourage you, if you like this video and other videos I create, keep following me, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all those fun words as I continue living my life at the intersection of business, technology, and the human experience. So let's get into this, because when I think about this whole space of what's happening with AI and as it's starting to intersect with all aspects of our lives, content creation is a big one. And for those who may be in the creator space, who may be thinking it's coming, or maybe you've dabbled a little bit with it and you think you've got some time, I would just let's say right now it's here. And if you're a consumer and you're thinking, well, I'm not comfortable with AI video content, well, that's something you also need to be aware. It's here. It's not coming for you. It's already here, very much so. And so, what I want to talk about is what do we do about that? And how do we think about it? And how do we do it well? Because I think right now, with many things as it relates to where technology is going, we have a choice and we can choose which path we want to go. Some paths, and not all paths, are created equal, from what I'm going to get into today. So hopefully you can see how that plays out. But I think this all came because I've been doing a lot of research in this. I'm an avid content creator, so I'm always exploring things. And I was toying around with some different video tools that are using AI to enhance, create, right, all across the spectrum of this stuff. And I started thinking to myself, is this something that people want, that they're comfortable with? And is this really something that we need? And if we do, how do we do it well? And like many things, I probably spend way too much time in my head thinking through these things and thinking about them and deconstructing and reconstructing what things could look like in a digital or AI world. And so I want to get into that today, not only to help push the dialogue forward in terms of what we can think about, how you may want to be thinking about these things, but also give some practical examples from my own experience and other creators I interact with of how we can do this, and also consumers, because I'm a consumer of content as well. And I have mixed feelings and I respond differently depending on where AI is involved in this. And this is by no means this is how I think about it, so this is how everyone else should. But if anything, my goal with this is to help people think deeply about this and be conscious and intentional about the way things are going. Because if you don't, it's just going to hit you and you're going to just have to accept what it is. And I think there's more opportunity, especially right now, to influence that and have more autonomy in how that goes. But I think before we get into it, it's worth unpacking what we really mean when we talk about AI and video. Because depending on who you talk to, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so when I hear conversations about how do I feel about AI being used in video, or have you seen AI content, things like that, I go, well, hang on a second. What do you mean when you actually are categorizing something as video made with AI? Because there is a really, really wide spectrum when you look at this. As you look at some things, even using basic transcription services for video content, most of the time at this point is using natural language processing. It's analyzing the content and coming up with a transcript. Now, there may be some human involvement in it, but largely most organizations, most creators I know are using AI for even some of the most baseline. Well, I need a transcript for this, or the automatic transcripts that in a lot of tools automatically happens. YouTube creates an auto transcript of any video that's uploaded to that. That is AI. So even if you think you're consuming content that is AI free, you probably aren't. So that's on the one end of the spectrum. But you can go so far as literally you could have almost zero human involvement. In fact, you could probably set up an automation to come up with something that generates everything literally from a prompt. And I'm going to talk about what that looks like and how it works, because some of these tools now are at a point with a very basic prompt that could be automatically generated by AI. It could create a complete video. And so there can you can go all the way to the extreme of there's absolutely no human involvement in that. Right now, where I would say when I look at creators, when I talk to people who are involved in creating content, who are doing different things, I would say a lot of it is right in the middle. I don't know very many people who are doing almost no AI involvement. I also don't know very many who are just literally handing over the keys and saying, we don't need to be in there. And even the handful that I've encountered, I'll just share with you right now, it's not great. So I think that's an important call out, is that I would say right now there's a lot in that middle, but the potential on all ends is there. And again, do I think there's really any content that you could truly, if you were to, almost thinking like an organic label, if you were to try and brand a piece of content as AI free, free from no GMOs, no AI O's, whatever. If you were to try and create some sort of label for that, I honestly think you'd be hard pressed to find any content that truly has zero involvement from AI by the time you actually get it to its finished processing state where it's hosted somewhere. AI has likely been involved in some capability. Now, I want to talk practically about some of the different ways that I use it, because I'll be the first to say, wouldn't it be weird if, as the tech guy, I was like, no, I actually don't use AI for anything at all because there's absolutely no need for it. So I use it quite frankly, I use it pretty regularly for things. And I'm just going to walk you through a couple of different ways that I do so that you can get a feel for how I'm using it and see, okay, like what might this be on that. And then I'm going to talk about, for creators, what are some of the considerations. So this is just this. And by the way, if you're a creator who's watching this and you're seeing something that I'm doing and you go, you know what, I've got an even better way of doing that, or I know of a better tool, I am big, and this is going to come later in the video, of what can you do about it. I love hearing from other creators what they're doing and seeing how it's working for them. So by all means, feel free to comment, message me through one of the channels and let me know how you're doing this. But like, so for me, if you were to look at it, and I'm going to pull this up, I use an app, and by no means is any of this an advocate for the tools I use. It's not sponsored, anything like that. This is just me talking as a creator on how I'm using it. So I use one app called Descript. I find it extremely helpful. Going back to transcription, it is extremely helpful for me in terms of being able to quickly get a transcript and then being able to edit. And maybe if I want to get some clips for things, I'm able to actually edit and modify videos and create smaller clips from that. Now, I know I'm only using a fraction of the potential of Descript for this, but for me to be able to get out a small clip, be able to quickly identify a section of the video that might make a nice short or a segment, getting a transcript is a really powerful way to do that. And I can do it in here. I can edit it, things like that. I'm going to talk later about some of the stuff that I haven't played with in here, but I want to start first with some of the things that I am doing. So right here's AI. I load my video in. This video will be one of them. I will load in here and I will get a full transcript, which I will then use for other purposes. That's all being done by AI. Super helpful. There's no way I would ever listen to an entire video of myself and try and get a transcript. And because I do this for free and I'm not getting paid to do it, I don't have money to go spend on someone to transcribe all my videos. So has AI been a huge benefit to me, given me something that I couldn't do before for the benefit of my consumers? Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's extremely helpful. So I think that's one area that I found to be extremely helpful for me. Another newer tool that I've used is, I found this one, video.ai. I've talked to other creators. There's a couple other ones out there, Munch. This is a growing area that, for me, I find it difficult to, actually go through and try and take everything and find every little instance where there's something really interesting. And this tool is pretty great. I can load in my video and it will use AI to quickly go through and try and find segments that it thinks are interesting, both shorts and short line videos. Super helpful. Now, what I can tell you from this, though, is that, I don't take it at face value. So I will just say that, and I'll talk about why, the considerations. But again, is this a tool where it can take one of my long form videos and repurpose it in a lot of different ways and help me, because again, it's just me doing this. I don't have time to sit and review my entire transcript and come up with where are all the different segments and all these other things. Extremely helpful for me in being able to do this kind of stuff. AI is enhancing the experience, not only for me, but hopefully also for you as the user, because it's helping you identify, hey, here are some of the key segments that come out of some of these conversations in more digestible forms that you can consume. Love it. Another one that I use, right? Here's one everybody's familiar with, Chat GPT. I am a big fan of Chat GPT in terms of I have an idea of what the whole conversation is, but it is very difficult and time consuming for me to sit and find time to go through and try and generate a description and what are the different sections of the video that are really well done that I want to call attention to, and where are those time segments, and how would I optimize my description for YouTube and all this good stuff. I cannot possibly be trained and skilled in all of those things. Now, I've taught myself some different prompts. I've crafted and experimented with different prompts and different ways of asking ChatGPT to do this. But with ChatGPT, I'm able to load my whole transcript that I pull out of Descript into it. So Descript using AI is identifying the different speakers and the different transition points. And then I can load it into ChatGPT. And through some of the prompts that I've crafted, I'm able to ask it questions about, hey, what would be a really compelling description for this in my voice? Because you just listened or read an hour conversation with me. You get a feel for how I talk, how I sound, the way I word and phrase things. How can you do that? Could I write it? I could. Would I have time to do it? And honestly, if you look at some of my videos, go back, scroll a little further back and look at my descriptions, you'll notice they've changed. And it's because I only had so much capacity. It was just me. I only had so much capacity. Now I have more capacity. And as a result, I'm enhancing the product. So now you get a better feel for what my videos are. You get a better feel for, hey, where can I find specific components of that? That was something that I wasn't able to do before. The Chat GPT has now given me the time and the capability to do. Going again, I mean, technically, I probably could hire someone to do it. They'd probably be using the same tools, but this is something I do for free. I don't have money to be spending on all of these additional services. So ChatGPT has enhanced that in ways that I probably wouldn't have been able to do before. So those are just a few examples of where I'm using ChatGPT to do some of this stuff. Another one that, I've toyed around with, I haven't done much with. Canva's a basic one, using image generation stuff. I'm not using a ton of this stuff right now, but in theory, could I be? And I think these are just some of the tools that are part of my portfolio that when it comes to creating things, I go, you know what? I'm trying to, if you're like me, you've all been looking for that image that you go, I'm really looking for this image for this, and I have it in my head, but I can't seem to find it. And the AI image generation tools have been really helpful for, I'm looking for a panda riding a bike in the desert. Okay, that kind of stuff. And maybe it's actually able, it takes a little bit for it to find something. Now, I'm going to talk about kind of the considerations that go along with this, but these are some of the tools. So there you go. I gave it some basic text prompts, and suddenly here you go. Now I have an image of a panda riding a bike in a desert type of a thing. So if I were to create something, I just cannot find the image that I'm looking for. And there have been times where I've said, I'm looking for a vector image for this specific thing. And it does a relatively decent job doing all that. It is enhancing things. And again, this is time I would have spent looking for this, trying to find it, all this other stuff. So that's me personally. So if you were to say, Christopher, how are you personally leveraging AI to enhance some of your content? You talk about it a lot, but how are you doing that? And those would be some of the ways that I personally am using it now. Now, again, if you're a creator and you go, oh man, here's another way that you could do it, please message me and let me know. But for those who maybe aren't using it and are looking to another creator to say, how are you using it, practically speaking? Those are some of the very basic and fundamental ways that I'm using it to create a better product given the resources constraints that I'm dealing with. So that's practical application. But I want to talk about, if you're a creator and you're looking at treading into this space, what considerations should you take into mind? Because it's easy to look at those things and go, sweet. Like just imagine what we can do. And going back to it, there's some tools that I may mention later that you literally can take a text prompt and on the other end, boom, you've got a finished video. But I want to challenge people to think about that. If you're in the creator space of where are you doing this? Going back to it, if all the tools I showed you, I was very intentional about deciding why I was going to use it and how I was going to use it. But one of the questions that comes to mind right now, if you look at people, is there is some skepticism around how do people feel about it? And that was one of the first things I thought as I was looking at some of these tools that promise to create all your content with almost no work. And I thought, how do people feel about that? I have mixed feelings about it as a consumer, but I'm curious what other people have to say on it. So I thought, well, I'll go to my audience on LinkedIn and I'll ask them and see what they think. And I was actually genuinely surprised by the response. I thought it would be skewed very differently than it was. It really surprised me that almost half of people, now granted, it's not a huge audience, but 160 people voting, and almost half of them said they really do not care whether AI even created the whole thing. Now, I didn't ask a whole bunch of follow-up questions and things like that, but in general, people's attitude was if the content's good, then whatever. If AI made it or a person made it, I do not care about that. The remaining, another big chunk, 32, were like, well, I'm okay with the AI, but I do want some indication of whether AI was used in this. Now, this is one of the categories that I think is going to get really interesting to watch as we look further forward, because where are you going to draw that line on AI was involved in the creation of this? The little subtext that you see at the bottom of every single pharmaceutical ad, type of a thing where you go, well, here we're going to have to literally notate, oh, it did auto transcription. So we're going to have to say AI was used in the generation of this. And clearly, a third of people, at least today, still feel like if AI is creating this content, I at least want to be aware of that. I would be really curious. And if you're watching and listening to this, I'd be curious your thoughts. Feel free to comment them in or message me. I'm curious your thoughts on that. Where would you draw the line? I mean, I personally, some of the things I showed in terms of how I'm using AI, my personal reaction to that would be, okay, if it's enhancing things or you're using it to help generate a better description for it or a title, or you're finding clips from a long form conversation type of a thing, I don't need to know that you used AI for that. That's very operational in nature. I've been in the creator space long enough to know there's a whole lot of operational work that goes into creating a video product. And if some of that stuff starts getting automated, I don't need to be made aware of that. Now, granted, for me, I look at how I create content. That content's coming from me. So I'm creating it. It's simply repurposing or enhancing the process by which that content created by me gets to you. Where even I have mixed feelings is if there was little to no human involvement in the creation of it, then I don't know. Then I don't know where I feel. Again, I probably find myself in that category of sometimes it'd be nice to know that, hey, this was purely generated by AI, or, whatever. It's my responsibility to, take things at face value and then see where I go from there. But I think the general answer is if you're someone who's resistant to AI, because of a concern that people will not accept it or they will push back or they won't want to engage with that content, at least today, I think you can put that concern to rest largely. So long as you're being responsible and so long as you're producing good content. If your content's bad, AI is not necessarily going to fix that for you. I will say, I think my prediction is we're going to see that change over time as it becomes more difficult to distinguish between human created and AI created. That's just a prediction. I'll see. I may end up eating my words on that. But I think something else is, so you really need to consider if you're a creator. All these tools, even the ones I've showed you, and I've played around with what some of other creators I talk to would say are the best of the best of the best tools. My assessment on them has been they all can be helpful, but most of them still require a pretty significant degree of human involvement to create anything good. So some of the chicken little apocalyptic things where you hear people going, "Oh, AI is just going to start spitting out content and we're never going to be able to distinguish whether it was human made and it's just going to go off the rails." And even some of the stuff you hear about misinformation, oh, the way it's going to be used for misinformation, I agree with it, but where I challenge that a bit is someone's still involved in that process. Someone is still making conscious decisions about what they're doing and how they're doing. Even the image generation one I just showed you in Canva, I consciously had to say, I am looking for an image that conveys this picture. So someone's still choosing to put it in there. Now, are there some where AI is just doing that? Yes. And I think that's where, but is there still likely going to be some oversight into what that is? Yeah. So I think the good news for people is things are going to change significantly, but the way that they are going to change is still very inclusive of the people involved in the process. The good news for people is I don't see a world where you're out of the loop completely anytime in the foreseeable future, if at all. Again, going back to quality, even if with some of these tools you could eliminate people from things, would you do it? I don't think it would be a wise choice. I don't think that would be a smart way to move forward. Again, I've seen if I just let AI do something on its own, even the descriptions, going back to my example, I love using GPT-4 to help write a description or summarize what my conversation and things like that was. Can I just take it at face value and copy and paste it? I cannot. Even when it's looking back at a transcript of mine and I'm asking it to use my voice and I'm giving it very specific prompt instructions on content I made, I still can't take it at face value. So the good news for people is I think you still play a role. That said, it is going to significantly disrupt things. And so when I look at it, if you are a creator and you're not using AI at all because you're in this camp of, well, I don't want to, or I don't see the value in that, I would actually challenge you in that space and say there is some real good that can be done for this with the right human involvement. And going back to my example with this, there may be things, and I think this is one of the things that I would encourage creators on is instead of just looking where can I eliminate people from the mix, it's more about what are the things that you would want to do that you don't have capacity or money or things like that to do today. And can AI help with that? So my examples are ones where that's exactly the situation I was in. Would I like more robust, detailed descriptions that include highlights from the different shows? Would I like more short form clips taken from some of my long form content to make it more consumable and digestible from people? Yeah, I absolutely would. But historically, there just weren't enough hours in the day. It's just me. I can only do so much. And AI has now allowed me to accomplish some of those things that I wouldn't have previously been able to do. So I think that's the thing to consider is how are you using it, but how are you using it in a way to accomplish what you weren't able to accomplish before? Is there also room where maybe I've optimized and maybe eliminated things that I was doing in the past? Yes. And if I had a large team helping me with content creation, might it change? Let me give an example of this. In my teams now, on the corporate side, in my day job, I have people who are responsible for content creation. Have I rewritten their job descriptions and have I changed the way that they're spending their time at work as a result of AI? Yes, I absolutely have. We're now using AI to do things that we weren't before, that they were doing before, that were very manual. Again, even like writing descriptions and some of these other things, that kind of stuff. Is it helping there? Yeah, so that they can spend their time in other ways. So it is going to be disruptive, but the thing that my take on how good it is, at least today, is you don't want to just hand over the keys to the castle to any of these AI tools and be like, it'll be good enough type of a thing. The other thing I would say on this is for creators, not all content is a good, more content, excuse me, more content is not always a good thing. And there's someone in particular my wife follows more just because it's borderline entertaining listening to some of the things this individual says. And this individual is constantly telling people, just generate more content, whatever it doesn't even matter what the content is, just make content and push it out there. And so, as you can imagine, this individual is a big fan of some of these tools and the idea that if you just shovel more stuff out the door, it's just going to be great. I don't agree with that take at all. And I think even the poll that I shared would validate that. People are okay with AI content so long as it's good. And going to my previous point, AI content by itself is really not all that great by itself. Can it be really powerful and have a broad reach if combined with human creativity and things like that? Yeah, absolutely. But I think for creators, one of the things, and I think this is a temptation that many creators are going to find right now, is you're getting that dopamine hit off creating, more content that's reaching people. So is the temptation going to be, hey, maybe I can just shortcut this instead of putting the time and thought and energy into creating content? Maybe I'll just hit the easy button and shell out a whole bunch of stuff so that I can feel like I'm reaching more people. I don't personally think that's going to be a positive move. I think that may actually further damage, well, that may just damage your brand. It actually may take away from the value you're adding. I think the other thing is, for me, one of the things that I think about a lot is this improving the human experience? And there's two dimensions to that. There's the human experience on the creator side or the operations side. So some of the tools I shared, are they enhancing my experience as a creator to not have to spend time doing this or that, or being able to spend more time working on this versus some of these other things? Yes, but I also think you have to take into consideration the end user experience. And this is one of the things that creators really should think about is, by adding AI, are you now able to my example, do things that you knew the people who consumed your content before desired and needed, but you didn't have the capacity or the time to do, or well, just the capacity to do? So, perfect example. I didn't used to have time to go through and identify key areas of these conversations or these videos I make so that for you as a consumer, you can quickly drill into the point that is particularly interesting to you. Can I do that with AI now? Yes. So is it improving my experience? It's improving my experience and it's improving yours. So I think when you get both those dimensions met, then I think you're going to see things benefit. I think the last thing to think about of, is it a good thing? This is very much my motto in many things, is what are you really hoping to achieve with this? And hopefully, if you're in the content space, I really if you're in the content space and your main goal is yourself, I would actually question whether that's the space that you should be in. If you're generating content or doing anything for that matter, and your end game is you, I think you might want to take a little time of self-reflection and ask, is this really what life is all about? Is me at the center of everything? And I think that's something to think about, is, just because you can generate more content, and even if it worked to make you more popular or have a broader reach, is it actually adding value to others? And if it's not, is this really the best use of your time and resources? So, those are just some things that I think, as creators continue to get more pressure to leverage AI, to use AI for different things, to enhance, to create more, and do these other things, is actually to take a minute. And I think that's what we're seeing with the whole AI movement right now is, I don't know anybody, I mean, there's some people, but I think the majority of people are saying, we recognize this is an inevitability, but can we take some time to think and be intentional about what we do? And if you've followed my stuff for long, it's still in manuscript format, but I wrote a book called Relentless Intention that is all about the idea of being relentlessly intentional about, why am I doing this in the first place? What is really underneath all of this? And if I can tap into that, then you're going to find creative ways to use this stuff while remaining true to the values and the purpose that you're originally setting out with. And so I think that's where I stand on some of these things. And I would encourage other creators, and I think a lot of creators are embracing it this way. Are you going to have your bad eggs out there that are on both ends of the map? Sure. But I think the large majority really are doing a good job in trying to approach it this way. Couple thoughts though, for folks who are in the creator space, just some final thoughts for creators on this is, now more than ever, if anything, I would encourage people to experiment with a lot of these tools. They are not created equal. And I can say firsthand, some of the tools that I've played with, I go, "Oh, man, like people were saying this is great, or I saw it on this, or they've got all the awards at the 5.5.0 and Capterra, and it does all these things." And then you get into it and you go, I don't know that this is really cutting it for me. So experiment. Now is a good time to try some of these tools out, see where it's adding value, play around with it and see what it can do, what it can't do. And again, don't buy into the promise that one of these tools is going to magically solve your problems for it. I say this about anything when it comes to AI all the time. It's only going to accelerate the good and the bad of what you do. So if you generate garbage content, AI is going to make you a lot faster at generating garbage content. If you generate great content, AI is going to help you generate better content faster, and that's not a bad thing. So I think those would be some of the things that it's worth taking a look in the mirror and really doing inventory on these things and knowing, going back to my previous point of being intentional, know what you're really trying to accomplish and seek out some of these tools that are saying they can do it and experiment with them. I think you'll find some of them do a great job, others, not so much. I mean, going back to just as an example of one of these. So, this video AI one I like. I personally, every once in a while, one of the ones that it auto generates is okay. One of the things I like it best for, though, is it does a really good job of doing the formation of some of these things where there's two people on the thing. Let me actually just flip to one of these templates here. Right. Like maybe I want to do it. Well, this isn't a good one. Like some of this stuff isn't all that helpful, but some of them are like this. Now, if you're not a creator, actually getting two different layers of video to play at the same time, be perfectly synced, and do some of this stuff, it can be kind of time consuming to play in layers and move these things around and duplicate things, try and get it formatted. So being able to do that pretty quickly can actually be really helpful. Personally, from a workflow standpoint, I find it actually works really well for me to find the actual timestamps that I want into script and then actually flip over to this and actually put in a custom clip, but then let it do the formatting of, well, let me grab, Christopher's head and then his guest's head and then actually trim that down to a thing. But I'm actually still involved in looking through the transcript, finding it, figuring out those timings, and then pushing it over. But again, is AI helping? Yeah, because it did the transcript so I can find it. Then I take those times, I put it in here, and it's formatting some of the video with some creativity in a meaningful way. But am I still thinking about this? Am I still thinking, what is the purpose of this clip? What message am I trying to convey? Versus just, could I let Chat GPT think all that up for me? It could, but honestly, my experience with it has been almost every time I go, nope. And I would spend more time asking for different versions of it than just taking a few seconds and actually thinking concisely about what was the purpose of this. So that's just something to think there. The other thing, I fully anticipate we're going to see a lot of consolidation. So if you are someone who's been a little slow to the pickup on some of these AI tools, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think a real risk for creators right now is you could find yourself having subscriptions to so many things, going back to me saying earlier, well, I don't really have money, because this is a free thing, to pay for someone to do some of this work. The real risk to me is I could end up with so many subscriptions, I could hire someone to do the work. And then really, is it solving a problem, or am I just getting a lesser quality work to do that? And so I think that's something that you have to consider. I'm optimistic that in the future here, and I'm already seeing this because I'm in talks with some of these companies, that they're looking at consolidating some of these capabilities. So instead of having to have 6 different tools in your workflow, you can have one that does all of this. And I think that's just going to be a maturity of the technology coming. So I anticipate that. So this isn't the worst time to maybe play it safe, but I also would encourage people to experiment and toy around with some of this stuff. The other thing that I will just say, and I think this goes beyond just the AI, is collaborate with other collaborators and creators. Not only because you're going to learn a lot from folks who are doing this, but more than that, as we move into the AI age, where I think people are going to start to struggle distinguishing between and real and fake real. That desire to connect with other people is going to be really important. And that's a really great way to figure out what tools are working, how people are using them, what different things come up. I regularly collaborate with other creators to talk about what are you finding? And I find it's a very collaborative group of folks who love to share things. So those are my thoughts for creators out there. A little bit of my experience, how I'm using them. Would love to hear from others who may be doing the same things. But I want to talk now and transition over to the consumer side of things. And I think this is a really important one. I'm just jotting some notes here. For consumers, I predict that we're going to see, especially with some of these tools. So just let me just give you an example of one. All right. So there are some tools now. This is just one that literally you can, going back to the all-in-one tool where you can prompt it and it can come up with a script and then it can come up with the voiceover and then it can do all this other stuff and boom, shoot it out the door. They're real. I mean, they're real and they're here now and these kinds of things. And honestly, even going back to some of the, concerns about like, well, what is legitimate anymore? I mean, I have an AI version of my voice that I could legitimately write a script and I don't even have to say the words and it'll make it. So in theory, someone could make a video of me doing it. Now, for those of you who, this goes back to something I said earlier, the need for us to connect on an authentic level. We're going to see this rise in just garbage content. My prediction. We're going to see this rise in garbage content as people can literally, with the click of a button, shoot out content. And it may be, and I think only as the AI gets better, it may actually be decent, where it becomes to a point where the stuff that is just being auto-generated is actually like, you know what? It's actually not too bad. I think there's some twofold challenges. I think that rise is going to be relatively short-lived. I think back to when I started doing LinkedIn Lives. That was in the early days of LinkedIn Live. They first, right at the transition period when they were starting to give out more licenses. And let me tell you, everyone and their mother was doing LinkedIn Lives. And there were a lot of LinkedIn Lives that were absolute trash. And the cream rose to the top. And please do not take that as like an arrogant, what I do rose to the top. I'm pretty hard on my content type of thing. The fact that those of you watching this or even watching it, sometimes I'm like, well, I don't know why. But what I would say is like, there were some legitimately terrible ones where you went, what is this? Like, who gave this individual a camera and an account to stream live? And I predict we're going to see some of this stuff with, the surge in these tools that allow anyone to type in a basic prompt and create a mediocre script and boom, it's paired with some visuals and some decent background music and bang, you've got your first YouTube short type of a thing. I think we're going to see that surge. I think the thing with it is I do predict it's going to die off because the reality is creating content, it's a grind. It really is. Creating it, maintaining it, continuing to push it is a grind. And I think many people who jump into it when they go, this will be really easy. Yeah, it is, for a little bit, just like starting an exercise program is great for like the first 2 weeks. And then if you actually want to sustain it for any period of time, it's real work. And so I think that's something that as consumers, be prepared for that. I think you're going to have to sort through a whole lot of noise here for a while. And you're going to start to just see stuff where you go, who even let this be made? Which isn't always necessarily, a bad thing, because I think it's helping people be able to identify the difference between AI content and real content. My advice, though, to consumers in general is not specific to AI. My advice to consumers of content in general would be just an amped up version of what it would be to people if AI didn't even exist. So even if AI didn't exist, everything that I'm about to share about this would hold true. And the same even with the content, junk content's going to be surging to the surface. It might be harder to find things that you want. You know what? Yeah, that happened when blogs came out and everybody could create a blog and there were bajillions of blogs and it was absolute trash. Came out with social media Anybody can be an influencer on TikTok. Okay, well, then there were a bunch of crappy ones and it just slowly fell down. So I think some of this trajectory isn't specific to AI. I think AI is going to amp it up in a way. The one thing that I do think, though, there are some things where you're going to have to elevate it. And this is where I say my advice is going to be amped up. AI is going to make it a whole lot easier to fool people by creating a perception of authority through the quality. And I do think this is a very serious risk. And the reason I say it's amped up is look at what's happened over the past few years in terms of misinformation, just sending people off the rails. And I wouldn't even say just the past few years. Look at human history, how partial information or misinformation or it gets into a tribe and suddenly something that's not even true or remotely accurate spins a whole group of people up to make ridiculous decisions and do things that they have no business doing. I think AI is just only going to accelerate it because what's going to happen is people are going to be fooled and things are going to look real. Going back to my example of there is a AI version of my voice that I have on my computer. Someone could type something up and make it sound like I said it. Is that concerning? Yeah, it is concerning. I've seen video ones where it could take a video clip and it could make a video of me saying in my voice something that isn't actually me. Is that something that we should be concerned about? I think so. But what's interesting about this, and this goes back to something I said earlier about the need for us to connect on a human level. I did this as an example where I toyed around with a video and audio that was AI generated that was not me at all. I just had to come up with something and then I had to create a video of my likeness saying some things. And I shared it with people who knew me. And immediately the response was, that wasn't you, type of a thing. I mean, they just instinctively knew it. So is this a risk in a world where we, in many regards, have lost human connectivity and we're a global world now. We're more connected to people that we don't really know anything about, but we think we do. So we have this false sense of, I know this person, but I actually don't know anything about them. Is this a real risk where someone could create something that isn't accurate at all, that looks and sounds and feels like someone, but that someone who knew that person would go, no. I mean, people who know me know there are just certain things that I won't do and I wouldn't say, and they know who I am as an individual. And if something came out distinctly different than that, they'd catch it right away. But I think the risk is where it's not quite so clear, or in a world where we don't have that human connection, are people going to be much more easily fooled? And I think that is a legitimate concern. As a consumer, you need to have your tentacles like wide up. My brother has a saying, he always says this, and it always makes me laugh whenever he says it, but he said, only the paranoid survive. I don't know that I've gone that far. Okay. I haven't gone to the edge of like, I need to be paranoid about all this stuff. My hope is in something far bigger than anything of this world. But I think the truth in what he said is that we really do need to have our skeptic glasses on when it comes to content, especially as we move into this AI world. We need to, before we respond and react, which we are so groomed right now to just react and respond to whatever we see, we can be really intentional on tempering that and thinking, you know what, I just saw this, but before I react, before I respond, I want to do a little bit of digging into this. And if this is someone that you know personally, good grief, go talk to them about it. If you hear something about someone and you have a connection with them, a personal relationship, and something they said seems upsetting or off character, then go ask, go have that conversation with them. You might find out it is 100% accurate, or you might find out it's completely false, or you might find out, well, there's a fleck, a hint of truth in it, but it's been greatly exaggerated and there's a whole lot more to the story. And I think as a society and as people, we just, as we move into this age, need to take some deep breaths, be quick to listen, slow to anger, on some of these things. We just have a tendency to react and talk too much. And I think that risk is only going to rise. And so for anybody who is consuming more content, you need to be aware these tools are real. You need to know this kind of stuff is happening. You need to know that people can create very authentic looking content in seconds that sounds and looks like someone that is not at all them. And I know sometimes people roll their eyes and go, yeah, but who's really doing that? Well, people are doing it. And so you need to be aware of that. And so when you see things like that, do what you can to actually try and understand what's going on. Something else that I think is going to be difficult for people, and myself included, this is feedback to myself as much as it is to anyone else. We need to be consuming content from dissenting positions. And I will be the first to say, sometimes it is very, very, if I have a very strong point of view on something, you ask somebody, you try and sit me down and force me to listen to someone who tells me that the only way training can be done is in person, and I would rather have my fingernails ripped off, type of a thing. But I'm being intentional about forcing myself to do that and to listen to voices that I go, okay, I really don't agree with this, but I want to listen to it and see what I may be able to take, and listen to it to understand, not to poke holes in. Listen to it to try and deeply understand what's being said and where that position's coming from and what perspective they're bringing to the conversation. Not just to go, yeah, and that's why I don't like that. And yeah, here's why that's wrong, type of a thing. And I think we're going to need, and I would encourage consumers, everybody, to do more of that, to grow your empathy and try and listen to people who you disagree with, and take a breath, think before you react to these things so that you're not fooled by this, because the real risk is you will be fooled. I mean, I know someone, I mentioned it in a video previously, who they almost gave away a lot of money to someone who had faked a voice and told them that this was someone. And I mean, they're real and it's easy to do now. You used to be able to do this. It's not that you couldn't do it, it just was a heck of a lot harder. And now this stuff is becoming democratized, and some high school kid in 10 minutes can whip up something that may send the world on a tailspin if people don't take the time to pause, take a deep breath, look into things. And I don't just mean do your own research, like do your own research, basically confirming your pre-existing biases, but do your own research as in try and learn from people who have a wildly different opinion than you, who think different than you do, who come to the table with a different lived experience than you do, who go, that's actually not accurate at all. There's more to the story than this, because not only is it going to become harder, but sometimes the loudest voices are the ones that you shouldn't be listening to. And I think that's going to be a really important thing as we step forward. The other thing that I would encourage those who are consumers of content, which is basically everybody at this point, you need to be talking to real people. Um, the risk of making decisions and forming opinions just based on what you heard or what you thought you saw or things like that, it's real and it's only going to get higher. Um, we're going to get to a point where if you don't curb this, you are going to be just exhausted, being tossed against the rocks by the waves of whatever it is. And so the more you can actually connect with real people on an individual basis, get to know them as human beings. And again, I think going back to that, don't just consume content, talk to real people from dissenting opinions. Talk to real people who have a different perspective than you, and ask questions and do it to understand where they're coming from. I think this is going to be the biggest way that we actually mitigate that risk of people being swayed by this. And this is hard. This is not easy things to do, but it's really important work to do to be able to do this. And I think it's going to help build us up and prevent us from being swayed by this, because it's coming like a tidal wave. I mean, it's not coming, it's here. And so I think the way we get around that is by an analogy that heard somewhere else, it wasn't related to this at all, was people who detect fake currency. They're not trained by consuming all the fake stuff. They're trained by studying and getting to know the real thing, getting to know the authentic, the truth, and getting to know that. And then when fake stuff comes, you quickly distinguish between that. What's interesting, and this just happened at work recently, where someone had sent an email that clearly was written by ChatGPT, And everyone knew it the second it came through because you could tell, because we actually knew the individual on the other side, and you went, nope, that's a fake. And so I think this goes back to that. The way we mitigate this, the way we distinguish truth from fakeness, is that a word? Is by actually getting to know what the truth is. And as we look at content, as we look at where things are going with AI, more than ever, we need to seek the truth. And that is what's going to help us to distinguish what's not true versus, well, let's just consume all this stuff. And I think this goes back to you need to talk to real people, get to know them on an individual level and be able to do that. Like I said, the example video I sent out that was made by AI sounded exactly like me, looked exactly like me. People who knew me knew it was not me immediately from that. And so that's where I think that's one of the things. So with that, just some final concluding thoughts that I have on this, and then I'm going to wrap it up, is as this is again a prediction of mine, as AI, and I call it artificial reality. I think I said that in the Apple Vision Pro video I did. As artificial reality continues to rise, the need for human connection is going to continue to grow. It's like artificial sweetener. You know, you have too much artificial sweetener, man, sometimes something made with sugar just really hits the spot type of a thing. And I think that's what we're going to see as the world becomes so saturated with artificial everything. The need for the genuine, the authentic, the real is just going to grow. And so you have an opportunity to not wait until you get to a point where you just can't function and you're desperate for it. So you can do that work now. But all that to say, I think AI and video, it's a great way to enhance the human experience, but it also has the potential to destroy it. And so going back to the creators, the people who are responsible for making decisions around this, whether you're actually the one creating the content or whether you're involved in decisions about how content gets created in your organization, for your social media like whatever it is, you have an opportunity and you have a path and you can choose. Is what we're doing going to enhance the human experience, or are we going to completely destroy it? And I think more than anything, right now is a time when, as we face those decisions, our future is tied to whether we make the right ones. So, with that, choose wisely. And hopefully, you found this helpful. And for any of you creators out there, please feel free to message me. I'd love to hear some of the things you're doing, how you're finding it. I'd also love to hear from folks and their opinions on how they're feeling about all this. I'm fascinated by the different experiences of others. So, with that, I hope you have a wonderful one, and we will see you on the other side.